Welcome, everyone, to the Environmental Services Committee meeting on October 15th. For pug owners, this is National Pug Day. I'm a pug owner, you can tell. So I will look to Vice Chair Tobias for the territorial acknowledgement.
Thank you, Chair. I thought you said pub and not pug as in dog. Thanks for the clarification. The CRD headquarters stands in Lekwungen territory, known today as the Songhees and Coosapsum nations. CRD also has government-to-government relationships with the Saanich nations on the peninsula, the Suk and Shinano nations in the west, and the Pachudat First Nation in neighboring Port Renfrew.
Thank you, and let us all be mindful of that acknowledgement and its significance as we conduct our business today. I would look for a motion to approve the agenda, please. Kobayashi and Thompson seconding. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion's carried. We have the minutes of the Environmental Services Committee meeting of September the 17th. The motion to adopt, please. Kobayashi seconding. Tobias. Any errors, omissions, or changes required? All right, seeing and hearing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. And just to acknowledge, we do have Director Plant and Director Wickham online and Director Holman online. Welcome to the meeting. Chair's remarks, I will be brief, but I do want to thank staff for bringing forward the mattress recycling report and suggestion toward advocacy. This came up at UBCM and kind of surprised us. So it's something that out of discussions at UBCM, all regional districts were asked to look at whether they would be able to put forward some advocacy to turn this around. I will now move on, and there are no presentations or delegations, so we will move to committee business and 6.1, which is mattress recycling provincial policy update. And I believe I'll look to Louisa.
Good morning, Chair. I'd like to turn to Senior Manager Russ Smith to walk us through this report.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As the Chair mentioned, there's been some changes with respect to mattress recycling, or the path that we thought was mattress recycling. So this report provides an update on recent exclusions of mattresses from the provincial's updated or upcoming expansion of extended producer responsibility programs in BC. So EPR programs are intended to hold producers responsible for the full life cycle of products that they sell, mattresses being one of those. And in 2021, there was an action plan from the ministry that called for a launch of several of these new, what they call EPR programs. And mattresses were the ones that were set to begin this year. So despite significant support from local and regional governments, the ministry reversed its position on mattresses in July, basically leaving local governments to cover the costs associated with dealing with mattresses in the landfill or recycling them. So for a CRD context in 2024, we spent about almost $170,000 on mattresses that were brought to the landfill. Those mattresses were deconstructed at a cost of approximately $46 a unit, and we were charging a minimum bin fee of $10 a unit. So we were essentially losing $35 a unit in dealing with these products. So the hope was this year, when the new EPR program went in place, is that the producer responsible for mattresses would be covering those costs and essentially would allow us to manage those without a hit to the bottom line of the region. So what we've got here is a recommendation that the board respond to the province's recent policy decision, i.e. not moving forward with EPR for mattresses, with an advocacy letter that reinforces CRD's support for the program that will reflect the true cost of managing mattresses. So as the chair had indicated, there's been a lot of talk at a political level and certainly within solid waste staff in terms of concern with respect to the cost, but also drafting and trying to align with the advocacy approach on that. So we certainly have started working towards that, but are hoping for direction from committee and board to move forward with that advocacy approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Are there questions? Director Thompson.
Thank you, and through you, thanks very much for the report and the brief discussion. I noticed the point in the report about the fact that what essentially is happening is that taxpayers are subsidizing users. There's a kind of a cross-subsidy going on because the taxpayers are picking up the cost of disposal and the users aren't picking up the cost. Is that something that we would be pointing out in the advocacy letter too?
So through the chair, yes. I mean, like I talked about in terms of costs us about $45 to deal with this material per unit. We're charging about 10. That missing middle cost, which for us happens to be a use or a spend of revenues associated or CRD Heartland budget, which isn't a direct requisition budget, but at the same time it is definitely a cost incurred by a local government that would ultimately have to be paid by someone other than the producer. So absolutely we'd be hiring or highlighting the cost differential and the financial impact on the district.
Director Brownov.
Thanks, Chair, through you to staff. Of those numbers that we have, do we have any idea of how many have come from municipal waste pickup? Because in Saanich, I'm thinking when university students leave, we end up getting a lot of garbage and furniture and stuff at the end of the driveway. So I'm wondering if there's any sort of notion of how many of those mattresses that we get from municipal waste pickup.
So through the chair, I don't have the numbers tracked to that level of detail. I can certainly undertake to get that information. I would assume it certainly is a piece of it. I'm not sure how significant or not. I know in particular with respect to Saanich, there were costs close to $1 million in terms of just broader cleanup that was going on with respect to things dumped, end of term, that type of thing. So I can certainly undertake to get that figure, but I'm not sure we're tracking it on a mattress level, as it were.
Okay, thank you. If I could, Madam Chair, within the report it talks about the reason for them to do this is inflationary pressure on consumers, but the consumers will pay anyway, won't they? I mean, I know Heartland, we technically don't put it on taxes, but if we have to start doing this and losing money, then that means the revenue we collect from Heartland to help pay for other things gets reduced. And also the whole idea of trying to say to government, someone has to pay, and if you want the taxpayers to pay, then what you're impacting is taxes to consumers anyway. So is that some of the stuff that will go in the letter of advocacy?
So through the chair, yes. In terms of, I think, at a staff level, we're having trouble understanding the rationalization that the province gave, and we certainly will be pointing out that differential between those causing costs, those buying a mattress and wanting to dispose of it, versus the broader community paying the cost through some other mechanism, be it tipping fees or taxes. So it will be part of what we were pointing out for sure.
And my last comment, if I could, would be in today's times, I know for myself, but maybe I'm unusual, I would want to pay a fee to help recycle the product appropriately. So just trying to think broad term with recycling and how people are feeling today. Yes, inflationary impacts, but I think a lot of us in this region are quite aware of recycling and how we can help. So thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have Vice Chair Tobias.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to find out from staff. I know that there's a recent trend in modern mattresses that they are rolled up and vacuumed, packed, and kind of sent that way. I'm just wondering if those types of mattresses are also a challenge for reasons that I don't know, because of potentially the foam density or the materials used compared to the standard mattress.
So through the chair, I mean, from an operational standpoint, the most significant challenge with mattresses are actually the coiled springs and the winding up within the machinery. So the deconstruction process basically pulls out the springs in a case and pulls out any wood. In a case where it's one of those, which I think we've all experienced to some level, rolled up in a box and basically cut open the plastic, allow it to fill up. It is almost 100% foam, so there's some fabric recovery, and then the big challenge ends up being, is there a beneficial use for that foam? Certainly from a landfilling perspective, if there isn't a beneficial use, the foam itself compared to springs is relatively inert and can be landfilled. I'm not saying it's a good use of landfill airspace, but certainly does not cause the operational concerns that we have with springs.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, staff.
Chair McNeil-Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, two questions. Through the staff, we understand through the staff report in the introduction that certain new EPR programs were planned for this year. Reference was made to policy change in July. Can staff indicate how that was communicated? This nature of at what level in the government, provincial government, this policy change occurred?
So through the chair, I'm not sure what happened with respect to UBCM and the conference that was occurring there and how it was communicated. Certainly from a staff perspective, it was communicated to us through the Minister of Environment on a staff-to-staff basis. Both, I believe there was a letter issued, but certainly staff heard through webinars and conference updates where they update what's happening within the ministry.
Thank you. And my follow-up question is, understanding that the different new EPR programs will come to be this year, if our letter of advocacy was to be seen successful, we would anticipate that they could consider a policy change and introduce an EPR program sometime within the next 6 months to a year?
So through the chair, one would hope. I'm not sure the exact timeline that they're able to execute on and whether there's enough momentum. I will say we have had feedback from staff at the ministry encouraging those advocacy letters because it does help accelerate their process for sure.
Okay, sorry, one more follow-up. Are we aware of other new EPR programs that have come to be this year?
So through the chair, I do not have those pieces right here. I know the most impactful from a landfill standpoint was definitely the mattress one because it is an operational concern in terms of the way we're able to landfill or process those materials.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair, I can just supplement Russ's comments there further to the director's question. There's been a fair bit of correspondence from other local governments, including regional districts around the province. I'm referring to a letter from the regional district of Okanagan-Similkameen, which indicates that the EPR changes are addressing certain automotive products, compressed canisters, emerging electronic products with batteries, medical sharps, and of course then there's the mattress issue. So those are some other areas where the amendments are taking effect.
And as the chair of Environmental Services Committee, I also have membership on the Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities Committee on Solid Waste and Circular Economy. And that's how this came to me at UBCM through Ben Gesselbrecht, who I believe is the chair. So I have Director Wickham.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Russ, thank you for your report there. Russ, you had mentioned $1 million somewhere in your earlier discussion there, and I'm wondering if some of that was, and the cost of the $45 of processing, if that included things that were dumped in just off the side of the road or up a logging road, or just littered. People didn't want to drive from wherever to Heartland and dump that. Are those costs included there? Was that part of that $1 million tag that you mentioned?
So through the chair, my mention of the $1 million was simply a reference to tracking of costs we do on an ad hoc basis with our municipal partners. And so it was my recollection that there was a significant figure from the District of Saanich that they use, as there is with most municipalities, obviously with Saanich and Victoria being the largest. Those are what we see the most, and obviously they're the most financial impactful overall. In terms of additional costs or costs from districts or from areas bringing into the landfill, we do track at a high level through our solid waste billing system, municipalities when they're bringing in waste, but we do not track at a granular level in terms of the number of mattresses they brought in versus other materials.
Okay, so I'm just thinking if there is a rebate available, maybe it makes it more financial, gives more financial incentive for people to actually drive to the dump rather than just stop along the side of the road and just tossing it out as if somebody else is going to pick it up. Just thoughts there. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just trying to understand what problem we're trying to really solve here. Like, I'm sort of confused, to tell you the truth. It's, I mean, from a cost point of view, the consumer's still going to get hit. If you put this onto the producers, they're just going to put it on the mattress price, so you pay for it. It doesn't matter which way you do this. But I was just trying to try to understand what problem we were trying to solve here. What problem we're trying to solve? Is it the cost issue, or is it? I'm not too sure what we're trying to solve.
So through the chair, I mean, from a staff perspective, our goal is to keep mattresses out of the landfill and to do it as a cost effectively as we can in terms of delivering the service. So we have that differential of about $35 a mattress, which if the EPR program gets in place, it will help cover those additional costs, which will allow us to do our best to keep tipping fees down. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is generally what happens when it becomes an EPR program is there's increased advertising and awareness and leads to higher diversion of those materials. Basically, there's an incentive or a requirement under the provincial legislation for the EPR manager of that product category to report on an annual basis and is incented to increase the diversion. So it ultimately pushes towards more of a circular economy.
Okay. Thanks very much, Russ.
If I can just add to the answer to your question, Director Kobayashi, cost, lifespan of the landfill, and reduced dumping. Just to round out the conversation, then I'll look for a motion. I also I see Director Plant. Staff, we have an increase in online sales of mattresses, and I'm wondering if there's a comment around the effect of that and how that could play out in this or be a concern in this scenario. And then the other question I have is around the coordination of this advocacy between various RDs. Is there a coordination?
So to the chair, I'll do the last one first. There certainly is a coordination among staff to align and have some consistency with our advocacy letters in terms of providing information to provincial staff that will allow them to have a good base of information to move off of. In terms of online mattress sales, I really, at this point, we don't really know the impacts, because what you're getting is you'll get the online purchase, and definitely it's trending upwards, I think, as it is in most communities. And that will replace likely a coiled mattress, which will lead to disposal short term. The question in terms of disposal of those mattresses currently being purchased, I'm not sure the impacts at this point.
Thank you. Director Plant.
Thank you. Just a question for you, not you, for staff through you. Is there any problem perceived by staff in addition to writing a letter to potentially issue a media release with the chair's letter as an appendix or as an attachment?
So from a staff's perspective, whatever makes sense for the board, we would certainly be willing to do. I don't necessarily see downside to that, and I think creating awareness around the board's endorsement of this advocacy is probably helpful.
Thank you. Having heard that answer, Chair, I will be suggesting an amendment to the recommendation when it's on the floor. And if there's nobody else to speak to this as questions, I'm happy to move the recommendation and then provide the amendment immediately.
Okay, fire away.
Okay, I've sent it to DCO Lagoa. And so I hope that they potentially can put it on the screen. If not, I'm happy to read it into the record as a very simple one-sentence amendment.
Let's get the motion on the floor. Do you? What I'll do is I'll go to Director Tobias to put it on the floor. Seconder, please. Just about everybody. Are you wishing to speak to it now, Director Tobias, or would you like to get the amendment on the floor?
Oh, let's get the amendment on the floor, Chair.
Okay. So I'll go back to you, Director Plant.
Thank you. I'd propose the amendment that you see on the screen be added as an additional bullet to the recommendation up to the board.
Okay, is there a seconder to that amendment? All right, Director Tobias seconded it. So we're going to the amendment. Director Plant, do you wish to add anything further on that?
I just want to verbalize in case this goes on the consent agenda, because I doubt there's going to be any disagreement amongst us on the main thrust of it, although I could be proven wrong. I think it's important that we just do whatever we can to ensure our advocacy is successful. And I think informing our public about this advocacy that we're taking is worthwhile and may generate some public attention. And if it generates public attention, it is more likely to generate interest from our elected officials. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Tobias on the amendment.
Yeah, I think this is necessary to wake our population up to the fact that this is occurring, because they don't think they're aware. And it also will highlight the need with the province that they've got to stop sleeping on the matter.
Okay, any further discussion? I will call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion is carried. I will now come back to you, Director Tobias, regarding the motion as amended.
Yeah, I think it's a staff recommendation is a good motion with the amended version, because I think it gives the chair some more tools to provide both public awareness and the adequacy or the advocacy that we require for this.
Thank you. And I was quite sloppy in the seconder, so I didn't name someone. So I'll allow Director Caradonna to speak to it.
Sorry, are we just on the amendment or on the main motion now?
We're on the main motion as amended.
Thanks. So I did just have one question, and this mattress topic has generated a lot of conversation. So clearly, there's interest in EPRs. But I just wanted to get your sense of, well, sometimes a particular waste stream comes up and it gets a lot of attention, but it's not a major. It doesn't take up a lot of volume in the actual landfill. And so I just want to get a sense of how this particular now delayed EPR affects all the other EPRs that are coming down the pike right now. I mean, would we say that mattresses are really a top priority, or are there other materials in the waste stream that staff would like to see those EPRs getting moving even more quickly than mattresses?
So through the chair, I would say mattresses are certainly what we would see as some low-hanging fruit. Certainly from an operational standpoint, and the compression and landfilling issues associated with mattresses impact airspace and operations. I will say, for me personally, the movement from residential EPR to commercial industrial EPR is significantly more impactful and is something that I think could do a lot more for the community than a lot of the remaining materials, including mattresses for that matter.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's up there as through the chair as one of the important ones because of how big, physically large they are, it sounds like. Yeah, okay. I'm very happy to support this motion. Appreciate staff bringing this advocacy motion up to us, and appreciate the amendment from the mover, and happy to support it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Chair?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to comment that thank you for staff for bringing this forward. I think there's a very strong rationale for this advocacy, and thank Director Plant for bringing the amendment because I think it has the potential to amplify the advocacy. And just further to your question, Chair, with regards to coordinated amongst RDs, or I don't know if there are cities who are managing landfills as well, but I would certainly look to work with staff to have a copy of our advocacy go to others to make them aware as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Ted?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just further to Chairman Neil-Smith's comment there, I mentioned correspondence among other regional districts previously. There is some coordination happening across the 27 regional districts. Typically, it's regional districts that are dealing with solid waste management plans in the province of BC. And so if the committee supports this advocacy position, I'll take it upon myself to also lend the CRD's support to the joint advocacy letter that would be sent to Minister Davidson on behalf of all the regional districts.
Thank you. Director Plant?
Thank you, Chair. I really wanted to speak largely in response to what I heard from a question from one of my colleagues about why are we doing this and what is the end goal. And I think it is that this board wants to show its continued support for end users not having to pay for recycling, but that it be producer pay. And so with this advocacy letter, we are saying to the province, what you are doing by changing direction is going against everything we believe when it comes to recycling, which is that the producer pays. And yes, it is accurate to say that people who are buying mattresses will end up paying that deposit. But why is this going to be any different than any other initiative when it comes to recycling? And I understand politics and the fact that decisions have to be made in tough times, but I feel that this decision change, because let's be clear, this is a change of direction from the province. They are not saying this is a new way of thinking. They're actually reversing exactly what they said they were going to do for what appears to be economic reasons that they're happy to have paid by the local taxpayers in a different format, whether or not they actually contribute to mattresses. And so the other piece, mattress recycling. So the other piece, just to add to this, is I think this is more fair, because if you are actually going to be acquiring a new mattress and putting your old mattress in the landfill for recycling, you should be the person who pays for that. It shouldn't be paid for by everyone who is potentially not using a new mattress. So I'm very supportive of this initiative, and I find the government's approach to this a little disappointing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? I think those were two delayed hands, so I'm going to say no one is opposed. Thank you for passing that unanimously, committee. We will move down to 6.2, the Environmental Resource Management 2026 Operating and Capital Budget. Louisa?
Thank you, Chair, once again. Senior Manager Russ Smith is going to walk us through the presentation.
Thank you, Russ.
Sorry, good morning again. You get me for both items today. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'll walk through the budget. There may be lots of questions, there may not be any questions, but I'll just kind of work my way through. Feel free to put your hands up, or we can do questions at the end. So I think this budget's here because it's $50 million. I don't know what is the hurdle to why my colleagues aren't here presenting their budgets, but so ERM, Environmental Resource Management, represents three service areas: waste diversion, landfilling, and energy recovery. The total budget for those three areas in terms of operating budget is around $50 million. Within that, we've got three categories. We've got the waste diversion, as I said, which is about $28 million. The majority of that budget actually is what we call Heartland diversion programs. So you can think of the material stream diversion transfer station that we have in place probably being the primary piece, and certainly has driven a lot of materials away from the landfill and to beneficial use. That's about half the budget. The other half is actually primarily curbside recycling. So think residential blue box, our support for depots, those types of things. Those are the two main components of that budget. Then when we move to the landfilling budget, primary to that budget, once we kind of get out of the allocations and some of the pieces that move through that actual section of the budget, the biggest piece of that budget is actually the heavy equipment. So it's between $5 and $7 million a year. It's the big dozers and compactors that move the materials around that our community brings to the landfill that hasn't been diverted but still needs to be dealt with responsibly. So that's a huge chunk of that budget. And the last piece is the energy recovery side. So that is basically two pieces. It's the collection of landfill gas, so the installation of pipes and ensuring that organic material that is off-gassing and producing methane, that gas is collected. And then the second piece is the new renewable natural gas facilities. So the processing of that landfill gas and conversion to renewable natural gas, and ultimately pushing on to the FortisBC gas system. So those are the three elements and the three chunks of money that make up the approximate $50 million. The next piece I wanted to talk about is just the changes from year to year. So we have about a $1.5 million or 3% increase over the 2025 budget, which for ERM is actually pretty good. We tend to do bigger changes. For instance, the year before last, we were putting the material stream transfer station in. We were doing all sorts of pieces. I think our change was closer to 30%. So we've got three pieces that are occurring there. I believe my next slide will break it down. It does. So with waste diversion, counterintuitively, we're actually decreasing our spend or our budget ask in waste diversion. What it really is doing is moderating our diversion spending. We've had really good success by sending updated price signals, by having the material stream transfer station in. We need to stabilize that stuff and not continue increasing our program offerings until we kind of get everything refined with this current one. So we're taking a bit of a pause, which shows a slight decrease, and it's more a lack of increase in programming and a stabilization of the existing system. So that's the reduction that is within the budget. On the operating budget side, with respect to landfilling, we've got a couple things going on. We've had an adjustment to standard overhead allocation, so that's more a corporate financial decision. The other piece, which isn't noted on this slide but is there, is we do have a new contractor that's going to be doing the landfilling. So we have a contractor starting January 1st, and it's at a slightly higher price than the previous budget, would also impact that budget a little bit. So that budget's up just over $1 million. On the energy recovery services side, this is what I'm saying there, the annualization of the RNG contract and utility usage. So we're learning as we go. We're doing things right now. We're seeing our energy usage is a little higher, although we're working to refine that. We're working with our contractor for them to deliver the service, and so there's a slight bump. We basically had a little less than 9 months in the budget for 2025, and now this is the annualization of those figures. So that's up by a total of just over $1 million. So those two offset by the $1 million reduction on the diversion side give us a total increase of about $1.5 million in the operating budget, 25 to 26. This gives, sorry about the font, this gives just a breakdown of budget revenue. In the end, we've got, well, since they're all blue, we have a couple of huge chunks. The biggest chunk of this is with respect to landfill tipping fees. So it is over half of the revenue that we take in. We've got about $7 million that we're expecting to see from the RNG facility. We've got other revenues associated with stewardship programs. So Recycle BC, we receive, and that's the light blue, we receive just over $10 million, predominantly from Recycle BC on that side. And so there's a diversity of revenue streams. I guess the main point of this slide from my perspective is about half the revenue comes from tipping fees, but the other revenue sources certainly matter and are diverse. So operating budget revenue is just showing a bit of the changes that have occurred. We've had waste diversion revenues go up by $2.5 million. This is predominantly the reset of the Recycle BC fees. So they changed their per capita, or their per household fee that they were paying, which in turn increased our revenue. So that was about $2.5 million. Landfilling, it's not really a significant change, but there's some additional revenue from some tipping fee increases that we see there. And then on the energy recovery side, again, it's some very minor changes, and it's more refinement in terms of what we are seeing with respect to actual revenues that are coming in. I will say we are relatively on budget, and we're really pleased with the way the RNG facility is working. I think it's going to have some really strong net revenues, which will support the utility and support our ability to do more with less tipping fee increases. So we're pretty pleased with that for sure. But overall, budget revenues are up about $2.5 million, again, 2025 to 2026. On the capital budget side, really, I just want to look at everyone to look at the bottom left-hand corner. So this is cell 4, 5, and 6 preparation, north end commercial access improvements. So this is all the work being done on the north end to do the build-out of the current approved landfilling area that would take us through basically 2050. So that basically you're building from the ground up so that it's infrastructure heavy as you place infrastructure and start going up. We're in the process, of placing that infrastructure, about $13 million more to go there. Expect us over time to decrease our capital as we start to simply landfill and take advantage of that installed infrastructure. So that is the lion's share of the $17 million capital budget. And then this is just a quick summary. So as I talked about, we've got an increase of operating expenses of about $1.5 million or 3%. Our revenues show about a 13% increase, about $2.7 million, which we talked about. Capital budget is $17 million. Capital is funded with capital reserves that we have, along with debt, and there is no tax requisition required to fund the ERM budget. So that, I think, is the end of the presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Vice Chair Tobias.
Thank you, Chair. Great presentation, and thanks for answering most of my questions in it. I've got a question about our biosolids and landfill. Is the trade-off that we're actually finding some more beneficial use to them reflected in kind of what we're landfilling now and how much we're landfilling? Is it having an effect, basically?
I can talk about the landfill for sure, and then maybe GM Jones would answer the other piece. But from a landfilling perspective, there have been no biosolids disposed of in the landfill during 2025, and we're not projecting in 2026, so those budget numbers reflect that fact. And then in terms of what's happening future-wise, if there's additional biosolids questions, I'll leave that to the GM to answer.
Thank you, Russ. Through the chair, that is correct. No landfilling of biosolids have occurred this year. I can't recall the exact date since we have a landfill, but it is mentioned in our monthly updates every month. And there is no plan to landfill biosolids in the future. We have a couple of options within the approved strategy that have proved viable and consistent, and we have no expectations of that changing, and we continue to search for further options while the work on the permanent preferred option is underway.
Thank you, Chair. And if I could follow with one question, and Louisa, thanks for bringing up the future planned kind of permanent solution for it. I think when I was talking to Logan Australia about it initially, a couple of years ago now, that they were inundated with requests for kind of the business case from their thermal processing. They were also had a lot of opportunities with it to further enhance kind of a circular economy. Experimenting, for instance, with syngas as an output for it, using thermal diversion to heat other things. So there became, I guess, a story to tell in an economy of scale and how that related to the entire process. And I think my colleague, Director Caradon, had brought up potential other streams such as wood processing that potentially could be used in that. I'm just wondering, at a certain point, could we forecast potentially some of those future benefits for thermal processing, not expecting them this year, but is it reasonable to assume that staff could undertake some possibilities, some forecasting on what other avenues we might benefit from financially as part of a business case that I think will be highly sought after in the future from other districts and municipalities wishing to follow a similar route?
Through the chair, I'm going to repeat the question and confirm that I heard it correctly. So you're asking about forecasting potential uses of the thermal processing system outside of the processing of biosolids.
Sorry, if I can, Chair, including biosolids such as diversion of landfill, potentially a market for biochar. All of these things were hinted at in the business case, but to kind of quote Stu Kaufman, we've set ourselves up for adjacent possibilities that we could take advantage of, or we could just follow with blinders on the business case. There may be other opportunities through innovation that staff identify that we could add to potential so that future CRD boards can look at a business case opportunity. So if we add this component on, we could create thermal diversion that could heat something else, or the extraction of syngas that could power something else, or using wood that would reduce landfill. So all I'm looking for is maybe an interest from staff to include some of those possibilities in the next budget that as we get closer to the thermal processing pilot actual, there might be opportunities.
Through the chair, thank you for the clarification. Just trying to organize my thoughts here. So, I mean, in terms of other uses to the process, that is definitely within the work plan for this technology. In terms of the timeline for budget cycles, it's a bit early to commit to that, as we are just initiating negotiations, and we need to do quite a bit of that technical work and design and permitting. So as we go through those processes, my answer might change within a few months, but I think at this time it is within the work plan. It is definitely being considered. It was part of the business case as adjacent benefits, and that will be pursued, and the board will be kept appraised as we progress through this process.
Thank you, staff. Thank you, Chair.
Director Caradonna.
Thanks, and that was a good answer, but I just want to circle back to it for one more second before we move on, because it's a thought I've had many times as well, which is that we could be in this situation, and in fact, I think we will be in this situation where there are certain materials in the waste stream where right now, because of diversion, we're saying, don't bring those to Heartland. Figure out something else to do with those materials. But 4 or 5 years from now, when we have thermal conversion up and running, it's entirely possible we'll say, actually, yeah, bring us those materials, because those are feedstock that can go through our process, and we can create more biochar with it, or more RNG, or whatever it may be. It could just be another fuel source, right? Like dirty wood is probably a good example of that. Do we really want dirty wood in the landfill right now? No. But we might want it in a couple of years. So it's important to keep that stuff in mind as we begin to forecast down the road what the business case is. But shifting gears back to this budget, I actually had quite a bit of difficulty understanding it this time for some reason. And I think it's because I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around whether or not diversion is fundamentally a good thing or a bad thing for the financial bottom line. We all understand that it's a good thing for the environmental bottom line. But on the one hand, when we divert materials from the landfill, it saves us money because it extends the life of the landfill, there's less material to manage, and there's other kind of operational savings. But then we're denied those tipping fees because those materials are now going elsewhere. Is that a fair assessment that diversion there might be a sort of a perverse logic to diversion, that it actually costs us money?
Through the chair, that is correct. The cost of diversion is higher than the cost of landfilling. So financially, there's higher benefit to landfilling than to diverting.
This is a big problem, right? I mean, this is something that I think like someone who's getting a master's in economics or something would probably want to study, which is that we don't want to end up in these situations where it's actually economically beneficial for us to say, yeah, bring us all that waste because we can charge you for it. Because actually, from an environmental standpoint, obviously, we don't want that stuff being landfilled. So I'm asking a somewhat impossible question here, but how are we supposed to address this perverse disincentive to divert?
Looks like I've been nominated. Must be the word perverse. I don't know. Anyway, so through the chair, I mean, at a high level, and we've talked a little bit about this for sure internally. I half jokingly say that if we hit our targets, 250 kgs per capita, we're going to go broke. We're achieving the solid waste management plan goals, but it comes at a cost. I think from a staff perspective, in order to get the diversion rolling and to incent people to segregate materials and bring us segregated loads, we are sending a price signal to charge them less, to say this is cheaper than the 160, put it all in a truck, or 150 a ton, put it all in a truck and dump it. And so we're trying to, in the short term, change behavior. But the second piece of that has to be to start increasing prices or start to basically level out the economics a little bit better, to try to understand how to land the financial plane as we get to a per capita waste target that will require us to be ultimately charging what it costs to divert the materials, which is more than the 150 a ton. So things at some point have to flip, or I know I'm not supposed to use the word requisition here, but at some point, like the financial model long term, 5 years we're fine. And we talked about this actually in a meeting yesterday. Like 5 years we're fine. 10 years, if we're successful in terms of achieving diversion, we've got some challenges in terms of how we make those payments. And so it's watching the price signals, ensuring we've got tipping fees set at the right level. Another piece of this that we talked about is flow control. How do we keep our waste in the region and ensure that people generating garbage in the region are paying tipping fees that help support the program that we need versus find the cheapest landfill? I'm not saying people are doing that now, but businesses do what they need to do to make their bottom line work as well. So there's a lot of complex pieces there for sure, and the observation you're making is certainly accurate, and we've been having discussions internally on how we kind of work through the next 10 years to get the community what they want in a way that it can be afforded as well.
Thank you for that. That's extremely helpful. And through the chair, it sounds to me, I would frame that we are on some level a victim of our own success. We've succeeded in recycling programs. We've diverted compost, we've diverted clean wood, we've diverted a whole bunch of things, but that does come at a cost. We've deprived ourselves of a revenue stream. I mean, what stands out in the budget is how big of a discrepancy that is, $4.1 million. I mean, what happened there that revenue is so much lower? Why is it so much lower than what we budgeted for?
So through the chair, I think probably the biggest piece is we underestimated how strong market would take the price signal we were sending, right? So we were having our, let's call it garbage at 150, and we're having a bit of an incentive to bring it in large quantities and share your information, but if we're 150 versus 100 to bring in clean wood and they have the ability to do it, they're going to, you kind of get, I wouldn't say hit twice, but kind of hit twice. You have them saying, okay, so 100 is cheaper than 150. It's going to cost me 30 to separate the materials, so that's still a net win. So we don't get the tipping fee. We do get some revenue on this side, but that revenue results in a cost that's above that $100. And so you end up getting those discrepancies.
That makes sense, but through the chair, do we want to rethink our tipping fees, or what's happening to those materials then? I mean, are we concerned about illegal dumping? Like, there's something that's not adding up on this whole story for me, and I'm trying to figure out what it is. I mean, if the tipping fees are too high, what are people doing? I mean, is it just going out of region? Is it being illegally dumped? Like, what's your assessment of what's happening then?
I will go to Louisa, and then Director Caradonna, I have a speaking list, so maybe some of the questions will be fruitful in terms of this discussion, because this is the key of the future challenge.
Through the chair. So a couple of things to note. So we did have also we overestimated the revenues for RNG. So that's why we're also below our estimate on revenue side this year, because we finished a project later in the year. So it's a delay in that cost loss in revenue. In terms of the rate, and I guess strategically how I would pose this is, in order to change behavior, the program is subsidizing diversion currently, right? So, but the service of processing waste, whether it's through a landfill, waste to energy, or whatever we do at the end of a process, the service has to recover what the cost is at the end. So eventually, we will need to correct the recovery of the cost, so that the cost of processing the waste, be it by landfilling or diverting, can be recovered through the service. The plan is to bring this to the board through this committee incrementally as we see the progress on diversion, and then other factors, again, as other revenues, as RNG and other costs that might be coming on board as well for the service are being discussed. So definitely will be conversations you will see coming through this committee.
Thank you, Chair.
Nelson, did I see your hand up?
Through the chair, yeah, certainly I can perhaps help supplement some of the questions, and I think directly to Director Caradonna relating to revenue being down approximately $4.1 million. In Appendix A, you'll see the committee summary, and the budget is built on expense, and then it comes to revenue, and it's done purposefully that way, because in all nonprofits, revenue is driven by expense, not the other way around. I think sort of the way a lot of people think around, nonprofits is actually the opposite that you would think about for-profit. You're not in the business to make money. You're actually in the business to balance. So as you go through expenses in Appendix A, what you'll see is that the expense in 2025 was actually down $4 million. So because expense is down $4 million, revenue is down $4 million. It's not sort of vice versa. You wouldn't collect the full amount of revenue if your expenses were down. And what you can also see is that the revenue, a majority of the revenue source in that gap comes from a transfer from operating reserve. So the plan in 2025 was to pull $3.9 million out of the reserve to balance revenue on expense. But because expense was actually down $4 million, you didn't need to pull as much out of operating reserve, and you went from $3.9 million to $1 million. So it's actually, that revenue reduction is just less from reserve. But as Ms. Jones mentioned, there's a number of offsetting things on revenue, and probably the biggest one was natural gas, but then made up a little bit of that on other revenue. But sort of the balancing line there is from the operating reserve.
Director Brownoff.
Thanks, Madam Chair, through you to staff. My first question that was on my question list was, has Recycle BC reduced the amount or increased? And you answered it, and I was very pleased that they hadn't reduced it. The next question I have is around, in the, what pages? Oh, you don't have it numbered. But in the presentation, the page that has environmental resource management service areas, I really need to understand. So under the landfilling, there's a program called CRD Enviro Programs. And then you go down the bottom, and then there's education. And then you go over to energy recovery, and there's CRD Enviro costs as well. What is the real difference between them as programs?
So through the chair, I don't know if we can bring up the fourth slide. So there's a couple of peeps, and there's just it's nuances, I guess, in the language that we're
Yeah.
using. So certainly CRD Enviro programs is basically Glenn Harris's group. So environmental protection, doing monitoring, well sampling on the site. So they're doing basically environmental stewardship, doing the monitoring required to basically meet our ministry requirements in terms of reporting on the landfill. So that is that piece. When we look at what's called environmental resource management overhead, that is actually CRD, mostly anyways, CRD staff doing work on the landfill with respect to, in this case, landfill gas, although this number looks a little higher than that, and so it may include other elements, but it's actually not environmental, not the environmental protection team. That is the resource management, are basically Heartland staff doing work on that item.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, my next question is around, and it might be somewhere in your reports, but what's the life expectancy of the landfill now?
So the life expectancy of the landfill today, given the approved filling area, is approximately 2050. Depends on the model you look at. It could be 49, it could be 52, but right around 2050.
And with respect to the reserve funds that we have from tipping fees to pay for all the various programs, you mentioned 5 or 10 years. Is that fund, or?
Sorry.
So through the tipping fees, none of these programs, waste diversion stuff, are paid for through requisition, which 99% of our taxpayers don't really recognize. But I'm just trying to figure out how much is left in that fund, how many more years?
Well, I mean, the reserves kind of ebb and flow.
Yeah.
So the reserve we're tracking is the operating reserve balance. And so we have target balances that are set by finance. And my only comment is, in the first 5 years, we can kind of hit those balances, even with some of the trends we're seeing. The second 5 years, the last 5 years, we start to have to manage with tipping fees or increase in tipping fees or other revenue sources, or decrease in expenses to make that balance. And so that's kind of the zone where changes will need to be made and talked about early, which is part of, obviously, this conversation.
Yeah, we've talked about requisition and stuff for years and where we might get to it. Okay, and my really last two questions are around First Nation involvement with Heartland Landfill. Is there any surprises around that?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. I would ask to define surprises, but I mean, in terms of work that's been occurring with the First Nations, the staff were directed to work towards a partnership agreement with the WLC around 2021, I'm going to say. So there's been a few years of work, staff to staff, on that. And you would expect some of that work to come through committee in the next little while. So there's been progress there.
Okay, my last question is, are there any surprises we should know about in the future?
I'll take that, Chair. Through you, Chair. Surprises, yeah, I guess good question. But there have been a couple of mentions that there will be information coming to committee through board soon. I'd like to think in the next couple of months that will set out how the landfill will likely be expected to fund a couple of agreements with local governments and First Nations. As Louisa mentioned, there's been a lot of work over the last few years with WLC based on their initial request. We are very close to being able to present some information for the committee's consideration around that. And likewise, some discussion with local governments around funding agreements to address infrastructure, operating and maintenance costs that will also be coming forward for the committee's consideration, hopefully in the next couple of months. So all to say, there will be financial implications associated with those agreements. This service will be expected, I would say, to fund those agreements longer term, which all plays into some of the financial modeling that Russ referred to earlier. We did meet yesterday to talk about how to consider the financial implications associated with new agreements. As Russ noted, based on the longer-term financial model, we will likely be able to fund the agreements shorter term, i.e. within the 5-year window. Longer term, again, with decreasing tipping fee revenues, there will be a need to increase the tipping fees or look at other financial support to address the long-term O&M requirements for the landfill and the new agreements, which will come at a cost, like I say.
Director Brownoff, I have a long list of speakers.
That's it. Thank you,
So
Madam
it
Chair.
sounds like Saanich might bring us a surprise in the future, because I heard municipalities. But we'll wait for that, and I have Director Plant.
Thank you. I just want to do some high-level questions because as much as we're getting into the weeds, this is the budget approval for 2026. So first question, one of your slides through you, Chair, Russ, showed that there is a slide sliver for requisition, but it is still zero.
Through the chair, yes, requisition is still zero.
Great. And the pie chart with the teal colors, the 20% that shows as a stewardship program, is that where Recycle BC funding is shown as revenue?
Correct. That, through the chair, correct. That 20% slice, or the $10.8 million approximately, is where the Recycle BC revenue sits.
Okay, I should know the answer to this next question, but I don't, so I'm going to ask it. Within the environmental services budget, the 3 areas that you showed us, waste diversion, landfilling, and energy recovery, are we allowed to support one area from another's surplus, or are the books kept separately over a year or in perpetuity?
So through the chair, I mean, the mandate I have is to manage the service broadly. We've put them into buckets for ease of understanding and to manage those pieces at a high level, but ultimately there's nothing that stops us, unless Nelson throws up his hand right now, from kind of subsidizing within the service. It just needs to be rationalized and commuted back through the ELT and the board.
Thanks, Chair. Perhaps to supplement that answer for Director Plant, the requirement under the Local Government Act is to segregate revenues and expenses within the service authority. So the service authority for solid waste is contained within all of 1521, or the Environmental Resource Management program itself. So within that, you can certainly have sub-programs, sub-budgets, and so on. It's not unlike legislative and general government, which we all love, which has a finance budget, has an IT budget, HR budget, and so on. Moving things around within the service authority is absolutely allowed, but outside of the service authority would not be allowed. So as Mr. Smith mentioned, diversion, landfilling, energy is all within the ERM service authority itself.
Okay, 2 last questions. One, just for clarity then, so if we actually find that energy recovery, whether or not it be through the thermal processing or the continued RNG, renewable natural gas, that actually could be money that could help offset the need for the increase in requisition that has been referenced to being something in the long term. And for clarity, increase in requisition as a potential option 5+ years from now.
Through the chair, as long as it's within the same service authority, I would say yes.
Okay, last question, and I think it's because there's been so many questions today about kind of getting into the future. I'm assuming we will have, like we have every other year, have a solid waste management plan progress report brought to us with some of these items being discussed so that we can potentially get ahead of it. Because again, today seems to be more about the budget for 2026, and some of my colleagues, and even my last question was about future thinking, which obviously when you pass a budget for 1 year, you're only impacting 1 year, but you're somewhat setting a path towards future. So will we be having that solid waste progress report sometime in the new year?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chair. Thanks to all my colleagues for their questions.
We have a great number of questions, and they're good. Director Thompson, then Kobayashi. Director Kobayashi.
Thank you very much. The $4.1 million question was what I was going to actually ask, because I was going to ask you where in the report does it detail what that is? You know what I'm talking about, the other revenue? And you verbalized it, but it was glossed over in the report, and I was looking all over for it. I was trying to figure out if it was in one of the appendixes, but it's not. But you did explain it to me. Thank you very much. So I just learned something here today, something major. And you just did a whole paradigm shift in my head right now. Mr. Chan, you did. You just said something that now I understand everything here. You said expenses drive revenue. Holy mackerel. My head's just spinning now. Now everything is starting to make sense to me now. I came out of private industry, right? Revenue drives expenses, and that's how we do things. But this was a major shift. Now I'm starting to understand. A lot of things are going click in my head. But my question right now is, it goes back to, are we going to be reporting another deficit in revenues next year? Have we applied the lessons we've learned here with the $4.9 million shortfall in revenues? Has that been applied to the 2026 revenue pie chart right now? Or are we going to be reporting the same deficits next year? I'm just wondering if that's been applied.
Through the chair, so happy to take a crack at this one. So I think to answer Director Kobayashi's questions, you'll find most of those answers in Appendix A. So within Appendix A, I believe it's page 4 of 19. So on Appendix A, on page 4, this is what we call the committee summary, which is meant for a committee. And it summarizes the financial picture for the next 5 years. And I'd also sort of circle back really, really briefly to say that when we get to committee of the whole, and when we get to the board, and when we eventually get to the financial plan bylaw, that bylaw is for 5 years. I heard a comment earlier that this is only the 2026 budget. That's not correct. It's actually the 5-year plan. And you'll see the 5-year forecast and projection here that is required within the financial plan bylaw. So specifically to Director Kobayashi's question, a couple things I would point out is that in 2025, expense was reduced below plan. So you can see kind of through this page, through diversion services, which is probably the most significant change, had a planned budget. The board approved a budget of roughly $28.6 million. But you can see the actuals came in at around 25.8. Right. And as you sort of work that down all the way through, you'll see that expenses came in below plan in the order of magnitude of around $5 million. You can see that in the total cost line.
Yes.
And that's a function of a number of different line items, which you can see there. And then on a revenue side, we talked about revenue being down $4 million. Well, if expenses are down that much, then, revenue's down that much. And that's kind of where that sort of lines up. Director Kobayashi asked if, have we learned from our 2025 versus 2026? I would say we continue to balance budgets. That is the requirement. So the 2026 core budget, you can see there, in terms of actuals versus core budget, the expectation or the plan that's being brought forward is total expenses $52.9 million. And then you'll see that total revenue is also $52.9 million. So we do continue to balance. I would say that there are some, pretty material shifts in some of the line items. You'll see that the transfer to the general capital reserve fund is significantly different. It went from a plan of 3.7 to actuals of 2.6, and then for budget 2026 is just under $500,000. And then similarly, you'll also see changes in the planned transfer from operating reserve. Was previously 3.8 million, and it goes to 0. So there's a number of different shifts there, and I would say that, have we learned from 2025? Absolutely, and we learn every year. And we adjust the line items, sort of accordingly as a result of that. But you will see that in 2026 and in every future year, as required, the budget balances, both in revenue and expense. But there are some changes and fluctuations in line items based on forecasting, tonnage amounts, rates, and so on.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's good.
Thank you. I will just round out with a couple of questions, and it's just in terms of forecasting and developing the budget. We have an understanding that construction will be decreasing. Do we look at these sorts of things, construction decreasing, waste streams going out of the region? Do we use those in any way as indicators for developing budget for the next year?
So to the chair, we do to some level, but our main driver is what's happened in the past year. There is a looking forward for sure and trying to anticipate. And it's certainly very challenging. I think Nelson would say we had a tendency to underestimate revenues in the past. I might have overcorrected on that one, and now we're overestimating, not delivering. The biggest challenge is we take any volume that comes to the landfill. And so we're trying to predict behavior, and we put one more fly in the ointment this year in that we started to play with price signals to see what was going to happen as well. And it's had a pretty profound impact. And so there's some adjustments needed to happen there. Now, have we adjusted enough in this 2026 budget and feel confident that we've got the stuff bang on? We probably haven't adjusted enough. We're still learning as we go through this. I do think there's a need to update committee sooner rather than later, kind of in Q1, to understand a bit of a plan of going forward. And as we talked about kind of that volatility and the decreasing trend that we're seeing, we need to figure out some ways to supplement either by attracting less volume or slowing things down, or ensuring we have a bit of a plan. But it's certainly not a wait 12 months and see what happened the year after, for sure.
Okay, thank you. So, committee, I don't have any more speakers on the speakers list. There is a recommendation. Director Kobayashi moving the recommendation, which is that Appendix A 2026 operating capital budget be approved as presented and form the basis of provisional 2026 to 2030 financial plan. Is there a seconder to that motion? Director Tobias, do you wish to speak to it, Director Kobayashi? Director Tobias? Further discussion, I have Director Plant.
Thank you. Certainly going to lend my support to this. Appreciate the good discussion. I do feel prompted to ask a question through you, Chair, to Nelson Chan about the 5-year versus the 1 year, because I think his reference to the perhaps misunderstanding was directed towards me, and I'm okay with that. I don't take any umbrage with that, but I just want to seek clarity. While, of course, this is a 5-year plan, we all pass 5-year plan. Each year, we actually confirm this is the direction we wish to go. So while there is a commitment to support this budget as proposed when it goes to, or not commitment. There's the opportunity to support this when we go to the cow at the end of the month. I do want you to just perhaps offer me some clarity on 1 year versus 5 year. And it's funny because I can see probably there's some machinations going on there through the face of Chair Desjardins, and that Nelson's ready to go.
Through the chair. So staff do present a 5-year financial view for every budget. I think the focus tends to be on 2026, but staff do present committee summaries for all 5 years. The recommendation from various committees to COW will be to consider the 5-year view. And it's not until we get to final budget in March that the 5-year bylaw comes forward for approval. But I would say every iteration always includes all 5 years, and they're sort of balanced that way. The last thing I will say, and I did want to circle back on Mr. Smith's comments, because I do have a degree in economics actually, but the price elasticity of tipping fees is, pun intended, really at a tipping point. So we have seen some shifts, and you can see it in the tonnage. There's a tonnage line on the committee summary as well, that as we've raised the tipping fee, the tonnage is decreasing. That certainly has a push-pull effect that was debated a little bit earlier on volumes. You can see in the 5-year view that when you get into year 4 and year 5, the tonnage decreases to a point where you need funding from currently the operating reserve. Whether or not that translates into requisition, we'll have to see in a few years, but tonnage dips below 140,000 tons at that point. So at the current tipping fee rate, you need to balance the budget by way of operating reserve, which is currently in the plan, but that could certainly be requisition at some point. But when you're funding operating costs from reserve, that's an unsustainable model. So something's got to give, and I think some of the signals you're seeing is in year 4 and year 5, we have to do something with the rate, because the quantity is going down, the volume is going down. So you need to do something with rate, or you need to do something with other revenue, which we had some discussion around that as well.
Thank you. Further discussion? All right, seeing none, I just want to make a comment that this has been a very good discussion. Several aha moments, which, as was alluded to, as we go through this budget, those of us that are sitting at this committee recognize there is going to be significant work going forward in terms of some of these shifts that Nelson has spoken to and Russ has spoken to. It's important that as we continue to have those discussions through budget, that we allude to these discussions so that the rest of the board is alongside with us, because we're going to continue to have these conversations. As long as I've been sitting here, we've been having the conversation around tipping fee ultimately is not going to be the way forward. And so I look forward to those conversations as we go forward. I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion is carried. And committee, there are no notices of motion that I'm aware of. No new business. So a motion to adjourn. Kobayashi and Thompson. Thanks to everybody. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. And we are 10:54. Next meeting is at 11:30. Yes. Thanks very much, everyone.